Hi and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about how to use affirmations to achieve your goals, and more specifically the do's and the don'ts, because there are quite a few things that you need to have right for this to be able to work. So on the blog this week I'm talking all about affirmations. You guys know that I do a thing where I talk about one topic in depth every week. I have a blog post, a workbook, and a podcast episode, as well as a YouTube video like this. So affirmations are the topic of the week, and I'm so excited to be doing this because I don't even know why I haven't done this before, because I absolutely love using affirmations to achieve my goals. And just to give you an example of one that's worked really well for me, or worked well, like I achieved the goal. So the affirmation I wrote down every day was that I will celebrate the last day at my full-time job on 30 June 2017 or sooner. I started writing that down at the very end of December 2016 and handed in my resignation about 6 weeks after starting to write down that affirmation, even though when I started it, I had absolutely no idea how it could ever happen. It felt completely impossible. So it's so powerful, and the reason that affirmations work is because you need to believe the what before the how will appear. So if you don't believe something's possible, you'll never be able to figure out the how to make it happen. And the catch with it is that generally we don't want to believe we can achieve something until we see the how, but it works the other way around. So affirmations are such a powerful tool, and make sure you check out the blog post on it and the workbook, which will help you break a goal down into something really specific and then get it into an affirmation and figure out how you can put it into your routine and really start to visualize yourself already having it, because that's really important, and I'll be talking about that in this video. There's also a podcast episode that I have recorded where I chat about my personal experience and a few of the different things I'm trying at the moment, because I find personally that with affirmations, I need to play around with them, and I talk about that in this video as well. But if you want to hear a bit more detail about my personal experience and my personal affirmation routine and all of that kind of thing, make sure you listen to the podcast episode. Again, I'll link it all below. So today I'm going over the do's and don'ts of affirmations. I've got 10 of them, and I hope that you find them really helpful. So let's get into it. So the first do is to be really clear and specific with what you want, which means don't be vague. So if you have an affirmation that you're going to be using to help you achieve your goals, it needs to be crystal clear, or it's just not going to happen. So it needs to be you need to be able to imagine it. So if you are creating a really vague affirmation like I will lose weight, or I will, what's a vague one? Like anything that you need to be able to tell whether or not you've achieved it. If there's no way of telling whether or not you've achieved it, then it's not really going to be helpful. So you need to make sure you're super clear. As I said before, the affirmation that I used, one of them I use quite a lot, but one of them that I used was I will celebrate the last day at my full-time job on 30 June 2017 or sooner. When I say that, you can literally imagine me celebrating. You can imagine that it's my last day at work at my full-time job. It's really clear. You can visualize what I mean when I say that. But if I had written down I will quit my job, too vague, and there's other issues with it as well, which I'll be talking about. But it's so important that if you are setting a goal, you need to have it crystal clear, and the workbook will help you with that. So make sure that you look at it down below. Number 2 is that you focus on the what, and that you don't focus on the how. So with that affirmation, and I'm just going to keep going with it to use it as an example, it was focused on me celebrating the last day at my full-time job. I didn't have in that affirmation any of the how that would happen, like what I'm doing instead of my full-time job, anything like that. It was just the what, like the result that I wanted. And it's so important you do that, because you need to create the belief that that thing is possible before the how will appear. And if you make the how up, so if I had written down, I will celebrate, oh wait, I should have thought of this ahead of time, what I'd say. If I was writing down like how I would quit my job, then it's just gonna be too, like, do you know what I mean? I need to be open to all the different hows, all the different ways that that can happen. So it's so important that you just write down what the goal actually is, the outcome, so that you can leave yourself open to the how. Now, what ended up happening was that I saw an opportunity to go back to a part-time job, even though I have a law degree and a commerce degree, and I was going back to a job that didn't require any degrees. It meant that I would be able to spend most of my time blogging, and I hadn't even seen that as an opportunity. But once I had been writing that down for a few weeks, I was reading You Are About Us by Jen Sincero, highly recommend it. And there was just a throwaway line in that about a actor, they can wait tables to support themselves. And I was like, oh my God, I could just go back to my old job. And emailed a friend. The perfect job came up a week later. I called them up. I said, I want to come back. They said, yep, come in for an interview. Got the job on the day that I did the interview, like when I was there. And it just all fell into place, and I handed in my resignation 6 weeks after it, when I had never seen that as a possibility before, because I didn't believe I could leave my job. So I hope that makes sense, but that's number 2. The third thing to do is to use strong language, really emotive language when you're creating your affirmation. And that means do not use really weak language or wishy-washy language. So you want to be using words like I am, I will, I'm determined to, I will da-da-da, no matter what. It's great to have dates in there as well, and you don't want to use I hope, I want, hopefully, like anything like that, that it needs to be certain, absolutely certain. It also needs to be in the present tense and not something like one day I will da 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 da. It needs to be like, you need to be creating the feeling that you already have it, and that's the key. You need to believe that it's already in existence, and it's only then that you'll be able to figure out the how, and that all of that will fall into place. And also next week I'm going to be talking about the law of attraction, because obviously affirmations are kind of like a subdivision of the law of attraction, but there was so much about affirmations that I wanted to cover this week that I'm just going to do a whole topic on that week. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to be going into my favorite law of attraction resources, and going into it, and I think it'll be helpful as well, because I was initially a bit skeptical of it, because there's a lot of chat about it being like hoping for a new car and it just drives into your driveway and not having to actually do anything. But action is a big part of the law of attraction. But anyway, I will go into that next week. So this one was to use powerful language. And number 4 kind of follows on from that. And that's do be really careful with your language and don't be haphazard. So in that example I was talking about before, I said, I will celebrate the last day. So when I had come up with that affirmation, and it does take a bit of practice, and that's what I cover in the workbook as well, like you kind of have to play with it to get the wording that feels right and is going to create the right emotions, which will create the right actions and results. So for me, I initially wrote down, I will quit my full-time job, and then I think I wrote down, I'll hand in my resignation. But all of those things left open the opportunity that I could be fired, or that I'm going to be leaving in undesirable circumstances. So I put in the word celebrate to indicate to myself that it's a really happy reason that I'm leaving. And celebrate is a much more powerful word, because you can really imagine like celebration instead of just, I will have the last day at my full-time job. I will celebrate. Like, this is really, language is so powerful, and using really emotive language is so, so important. Number 5 is do allow yourself to overachieve and don't limit yourself with your affirmation. So you might have noticed that in that affirmation I was talking about, I said, I will celebrate the last day at my full-time job on 30 June 2017 or sooner. So I left open the opportunity that I would leave my job before 30 June 2017. I actually did have my last day at my full-time job on the 10th of March 2017. So way before I ever expected to. And part of that is because I had left that open as a possibility in my affirmation. And the affirmation is just a belief that I'm creating. And then once I have that belief that I could even leave before 30 June, I found a way to make it happen. So again, it's about creating a belief in the outcome so that your brain can figure out the how. And it's actually called reticular activation. And so if you're feeling this is a bit woo-woo, it's very sciencey actually, but I'll go into that in the law of attraction stuff next week. But it is just really important that you give yourself that opportunity to overshoot your goals. So you might want to use words like or sooner or better or more. And this is something I actually learned from Jack Canfield in his book, The Success Principles, because he talks about with goal setting, you always want to leave room to overshoot it. And so I put that in my affirmation and I feel like it made such a big difference. So number 6 is do handwrite it or visualize it, and don't just think about it. So when you're creating an affirmation, you're really trying to create a new belief and have that belief create a new emotion, which will then create a new action and a new result. So a thought, if you don't believe in a thought, so you can have a thought and not believe it, it doesn't create emotion. It's only when you believe a thought you're having that it will create the necessary emotion. So for me, I personally write down my affirmations 15 times every day. It's something that I got out of Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, and it's actually that book that introduced me to this, because in the little section that was on that, it was explained in terms of reticular activation and how it works, and I thought like I may as well give it a shot. And before that, I hadn't heard of it described in that scientific way, that you're actually just training your brain what to focus on. And for me, that was what sealed the deal and actually enabled me to like be willing to actually give it a shot. So for this one, it's just so important that you either handwrite it, and I recommend 15 times a day. You could do more, you could probably do less, but that's what I recommend. Or you visualize it. And the reason I handwrite it is because I find I do struggle with visualizing. But when I'm handwriting, I am visualizing. Like that handwriting, that experience of writing down, I will celebrate the last day at my full-time job, I'm imagining that happening as I'm writing it. So that's kind of like prompting me to visualize it. But if you want, and this is something I'm currently experimenting with, and I talk about this more in the podcast episode, but you can meditate, which I think a lot of people do recommend, and this is what I'm doing. Meditate to just kind of get your mind into that good place, and then visualize it, and you're meant to be imagining how you feel, imagining what everything will look like as if you're having it right now. The emotions, making it into a really emotional experience is what kind of gets it into that place where you can then create action and result from it. So having emotions, thinking about the smells, like you need to be able to taste it. And there's a great saying I heard. Also, I've been watching, side note, I've been watching so many amazing YouTube videos about affirmations. One of them was Conor McGregor, who I think he's martial arts, like I should know that, but he used visualization to help him achieve things that people never thought he could. He has some great advice on it. And you guys know I love like following people, not just in my industry or people that I personally like following, but I think there's wisdom in so many different places. So there's this Conor McGregor video, I'll link it, and there's also this one of this cute old lady who's won over 5,000 competitions for like cars, holidays, money, all of that kind of thing. And she talks about how she used the law of attraction. But the reason I've gone off on this side tangent is Conor McGregor mentioned that, and he mentions this multiple times in multiple different interviews, that if you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. And that's what you're trying to create. You really have to create it in your mind that you already have it. Not that you will have it, that it's already happening. So there's also some great videos from Jim Carrey. A lot of really successful people talk about the law of attraction and visualization and believing something happens before you can actually see how it will happen. So I'll link all of that below. I'm such a nerd about this stuff and I can't wait to dive even further into it next week. But for this one, going back to what I'm trying to talk about, the do is to handwrite it or visualize it, and the don't is to just think about it every now and again in your mind. So number 7 is do focus on it every day and don't just focus on it when things are going well. So if you have a goal that you're wanting to achieve and you have this affirmation, it's really easy, particularly when you're just starting it, it's really easy to stick to that habit of visualizing it or handwriting it because it feels possible. But especially if you have a goal with a deadline, which goals should have deadlines, but if you have a goal with a deadline, then as the deadline gets closer, you might find that you're going to be pulling away from your habit of handwriting or visualizing this affirmation, because it's going to feel like as you get closer to that, it might feel like potentially it's less likely to happen. And often we just self-sabotage by completely stopping, because if we think we might fail, then we create that so that we don't have that disappointment of failure. Like we bring that into our control, if that makes sense. I'll link some videos below where I talk about that self-sabotage stuff. But it's really, really important that you focus on it every single day, not just when things are going well, not just when you're feeling like it. It's also really important not to get disheartened and not to focus on any lack or scarcity. And I talk about this in the podcast episode, but the affirmation I've been using for the last couple of months, I've just realized actually when I was putting together the stuff for this week's content, that I have really been in a lack mentality around it, and that's the reason I'm kind of stopping myself. And that's also the reason I fell out of my daily habit of handwriting it down. So listen to the podcast episode for more on that, because I don't have time to go into it in this video. But it's so important to make sure you do it every single day, to not let yourself get disheartened about it, to really just be focused on the experience of having that now, to be grateful for the things you do have. It can't come from a place of lack. It has to come from a place of abundance. Number 8 is do work it into your routine and don't rely on your memory. So I personally handwrite every morning as part of my morning routine. There's a little spot for it in my morning routine. I'll link below my morning routine videos that'll help you figure out how to create your own if you want to, and my guide as well. But it's so important you don't just rely on your memory and think like, I'll do it sometime today. You really need to have a designated time. So whether you're handwriting it or visualizing it, you need to work that into your day-to-day life. And with this kind of thing, I always recommend attaching it to something you already always do. So not something that could be negotiable like exercise for most people, but waking up, going to sleep, showering, and brushing your teeth are all things that you will do every single day, hopefully, no matter what's happening. So if you're just getting started, I definitely recommend connecting it to one of those things. Number 9 is be willing to feel silly and do not get disheartened. So when I was writing down that affirmation about leaving my full-time job, I felt like an idiot. Like for the first couple of weeks, that's also a good sign. It's a good stretch goal, because if you already believed it, you would already have it. And once you do believe it, you will have it, which is the whole law of attraction affirmation thing. But generally, if you're creating a goal about something you don't already have, then like it has to be that you don't believe that, because if you did, you'd have it. So you're going to feel like an idiot when you first start writing this down in such a way that's so powerful and so certain, because we're very comfortable generally with creating vague goals because they don't make us feel uncomfortable when we say, oh, I'm going to lose, I hope I lose 5 kilos. Like, that doesn't bring up any discomfort because there's no certainty and there's no power in that. But when there's power and certainty, it feels a bit strange because you're not used to it. And also, if you don't currently believe that, you're kind of like butting against your current belief. But you just have to be willing to feel silly. It only, like, depending on how big your goal is, like the one that I'm working towards at the moment, it's an impossible goal by design, and I still feel like an idiot when I write it down, which I think is part of the reason it hasn't been working. And the final one is, do be willing to play around with it and don't be rigid about it. So for this one, it's so important, and God, have I said so important like 50 billion times? Sorry. It's very important. I don't know what else to say. It's imperative that you play around with it and have fun with it, because often I find like it takes me a few days to kind of figure out exactly what I want and the right language, and you can really, usually, for me at least, I can only figure that out by doing it. So I'll brainstorm on paper, and I go through this in the workbook, but I brainstorm on paper some different options for affirmations, and then I'll write one out 15 times, and I'm kind of gauging like, is that creating the right emotion or not? And if it's not, then I'll change it. So once you get onto an affirmation that you really feel is creating the right emotion, it's so important. It needs to create the right emotion, and the emotion needs to be the emotion that you already have it. So play around with it a bit and try different things. Like at the moment, I'm trying out the visualization thing as well as the handwriting thing. I'm also trying out writing a longer one. I don't tend to use the ones that are like 3 words, like I am powerful or whatever, because for me that feels a bit vague, but I've heard that it works really well. So yeah, so they are my 10 do's and don'ts when it comes to affirmations. I hope this has been helpful. I will jot them down below in the description box. Wow, this description box is going to be full. But I will jot them down below there so that you can have a look over them. But make sure you check out the blog posts and the workbook, which are going to help you create your own affirmations. And it might even be helpful to go and do that and then come back and revisit this, just to check that your affirmation is ticking off all the right criteria. And if you want to hear more about my personal experience, the podcast episode is where to get all of that. And next week, I'll be going more into the law of attraction and who I love following that talks about that and the principles of it, how it works, is it woo-woo bullshit, is it science, what is it? Like, I'm going to be going into all that. I can't wait to dig into that and do the research. And I've been loving creating content in the way that I have for the last few weeks, which is having one topic that I dive into and cover in all different ways, because I just geek out over it. And instead of me coming up with like little bits and pieces of advice, I feel so much more helpful knowing that I can really guide you through doing something instead of just kind of leaving you high and dry after getting you inspired. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!